Welcome to the deep dive. We're always trying to pull back the curtain on these really compelling stories,
Huh.
turning all this complex info into those aha moments. And today, yeah, we're diving deep, really deep into the journey of Money Meach Demetrius Tolliver, how he came up from Buffalo, built this whole independent hip hop thing. So, our mission for you listening is to really pull out the key stuff from, well, a whole stack of sources. We've got podcast concepts, articles from Honk Magazine, The Hype Magazine, his website, moneymeach.com. We really want to get, like, how does a unique voice like his actually make it? How does it thrive in the music industry, which, let's be honest, can be pretty brutal?
Right. And this deep dive, it's really about exploring the how and the why.
Hmm.
How did he sustain that independence, that authenticity? We're kind of looking for the blueprints, the mindset. How he navigated some serious obstacles, not just to make art, but to build a real business. And there are definitely lessons here, I think, for anyone trying to carve out their own path, no matter what they do.
Okay, so let's kick off right at the beginning. Demetrius Tolliver's origin story, back in Buffalo. Sources like Reddit and Honk Magazine, they really talk about how those early years, and yeah, especially the time he spent incarcerated,
Hmm.
how much that shaped his art. It kind of makes you ask, how did prison become more than just, a setback? How did it actually shape his artistic goals, his whole lyrical identity?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, I think, because sure, hardship can be a catalyst for lots of artists.
Yeah.
But for Money Meach, that time inside seems like it was less a simple setback and more of like a forced crucible, a period of intense focus. It feels like it gave him the space, maybe the necessity, to really hone his voice, craft a lyrical strategy, almost like this self-taught masterclass in telling stories under pressure. That's pretty unique. He's mentioned Nas as an influence, and you can definitely hear echoes of that in his early stuff, like Rear View Life or Superstar Lifestyle. It wasn't just, oh, life is hard. It seems like it fueled this raw, almost journalistic way of looking at things in his lyrics.
Okay, so from that crucible, like you said, he emerges with this autistic fire. But then the next huge challenge, right? How do you build something real from that? And that's where Take Money Entertainment comes in. Pure indie grit. Let's unpack that a bit. Him launching this label with his friend Jay Batters, the Hype magazine, his website, they detail some strategies they use for releases like Free J, the red tape. How did they keep it consistent with all the obstacles and indie label faces?
Yeah, it's a classic indie hustle story, but maybe with a more strategic edge. Instead of just waiting around for a major deal, they built their own thing, their own way of getting music out, building a community. And they weren't just, dropping EPs online. These shorter releases, they treated them like events, almost grassroots campaigns. Things like local pop-up listening parties, maybe. Or those street visuals you mentioned, like actual custom murals, wheat paste popping up overnight, turning album art into, like, public art.
Right, creating buzz beyond just social media.
Exactly. That kind of hyper-local physical thing really cuts through. When you skip the major labels, you have to get creative with building that community. And it looks like Meach and J Batters really focused on direct engagement, consistent drops, building loyalty from the ground up.
And what really locked in that loyalty, beyond just the clever tactics, must have been the stories themselves, those raw street narratives. So let's dig into that, the heart of his art, the storytelling. You just can't deny the grit, the emotion, the authenticity. The Hype magazine, Shazam, they break down tracks like Powder and Pills, Dark Days, Digital Currency. What is it about tracks like those and just his style overall that really grabs your attention?
Well, one thing is how he uses his own life.
Hmm.
But it's not just recounting events, is it? It's like he opens a window onto a specific reality. It feels visceral. He doesn't just rap about stuff. He seems to really unpack the feelings, the psychological side of it, the circumstances behind the verse. It's immersive. You feel the authenticity, I think, and that builds a deeper connection than just, a catchy hook. And he's not afraid to be vulnerable, which is key for building that trust, that rapport with listeners.
Okay, and this is where the personal stuff really connects with the art in a powerful way. Let's talk about the Free J series. These are whole projects, right? Dedicated to his friend Jay Batters, who was incarcerated. Sources like Wikipedia, the Hype magazine, they point to these themes: brotherhood, loyalty, just keeping going under intense pressure. What made these specific projects resonate so much, not just for him, but for anyone who's been through serious struggles?
Yeah. The Free J series, it feels like it goes beyond just music. It's this really profound statement, isn't it, about loyalty, about sticking together through the worst. And it makes you think, like, how does storytelling become a kind of activism in his work? Amplifying messages, showing realities that maybe aren't always seen or heard. The series is just a powerful example of taking dedication, loyalty, and turning it into art that carries real weight, social weight, emotional weight. It's like a voice for people often overlooked, a story of resilience, a promise kept, maybe even a kind of protest through art.
Which brings us right back to that big balancing act for artists today.
Hmm.
Independence versus exposure. Let's try and unpack that. How has staying independent really shaped Money Meach's creative path? His
Right.
freedom, his release schedules, his authenticity. So it sounds great, right? Total creative control. But in an industry driven by huge marketing budgets, how does someone like Meach actually scale up without that major label machine behind him? Is it a trade-off? Does it limit his reach, even with all that authenticity?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? For pretty much any indie artist. For Money Meach, it seems like a very deliberate choice. He's prioritizing integrity, creative control, over maybe getting huge overnight. When you weigh the pros and cons, in the streaming world today, artists have to make these really tough calls. For him, independence means he controls the net narrative, the schedule. That reinforces the authentic feel. But yeah, the flip side is he's basically got to carve out his own path to a wider audience. No big marketing machine. It's more of a slow burn, right? Building community first, rather than a big, splashy launch from the top down.
And then there's the person behind the persona, the personal side of Money Meach. Sources like his website, Honk Magazine, they talk about him being a devoted dad, his faith, how he balances the hustle with these core personal values. It makes you wonder, how does he actually stay grounded, when the spotlight's potentially on him? And how does that personal grounding maybe influence his business moves?
It really seems like that personal grounding the family, the faith acts as an anchor, and it directly feeds into his longer-term vision. He seems to be looking beyond just his own rap career, thinking about concrete business plans, expanding Take Money Entertainment, mentoring younger artists. So you start to see this strategic shift where his personal values aren't just like background noise. They're actually driving him to build something lasting, something beyond just his own music, maybe something that lifts up his community too.
Right, okay. And finally, let's touch on the whole brand package, the visuals, the sound, his website, SoundCloud, Honk Magazine. They give us glimpses of his music videos like Medulla, Visionary, and his beat selection, which is pretty distinctive.
Mm.
His whole visual style, the aesthetics, the album art, it all seems to contribute to this cohesive identity. How does he make sure all those pieces fit together, reinforce the lyrical themes?
Yeah, what's really striking there is how carefully an independent artist like him seems to craft the entire brand, making sure every little piece, visual and sound, clicks with the core message. From those grassroots street visuals we talked about earlier, right up to the actual music videos, it all seems to work together. His beat choices often have this melancholic but still gritty feel, which mirrors the lyrics about struggle and perseverance.
Yeah, I hear that.
And the album artwork often uses quite stark symbolic imagery. It visually conveys that emotional weight in the stories. It really solidifies his identity as, a serious artist and an entrepreneur. It's quite deliberate.
So wrapping this all up, what does this journey mean for you listening in? Money Meach's story, it's not just interesting, right? It's this powerful example of what authenticity can do, the strategic power of independence, and just that incredible ability to turn really tough times into compelling art. And yeah, a real business. It feels like a blueprint for resilience, for self-determination.
Absolutely. It's more than just music. It's like a master class in building something meaningful from the ground up. And it leaves you with that thought, doesn't it? How could you maybe apply some of those principles, that indie grind, that authentic storytelling, that fierce loyalty to your own passions, your own goals? Makes you think about how those elements could help you navigate whatever obstacles you're facing, in whatever field you're in.